Hello, my name's Tom, back talking about F1 Fantasy, and we're going into a triple header weekend. Another one, and this we got sprint in COTA, followed by regular race weekend in Mexico, and then another sprint in Brazil. So 3 weekends of F1 madness, 3 weekends of F1 fantasy madness, and then just five race weekends in total until the end of the season. So it's now or never for cementing our positions or hopefully improving, unless you're, literally number one, improving our ranks in both global and in our mini leagues. So I think these next 3 weeks are literally make or break. Particularly for my season, I know for a fact it's going to make or break it, because I still got the triple DRS boost, which I'm going to discuss quite a lot in this video because it's quite a lot on my mind at the moment. And there'll be a few people out there that still have their triple DRS boost as well that are wondering when is the best time to use it, because I've held on to it, and I will discuss my thoughts on that in a moment. But yeah, I just want to sort of review what happened in Qatar very briefly before we get into the proper team selection meat of COTA. So in Qatar, another sprint race. I guess kind of touched on the triple DRS already. I was very tempted, almost as not quite as tempted as I was back in Austria when I nearly used the triple DRS boost, but I was very tempted again because of how strong McLaren looked, and I thought it'd be quite an easy 2 times DRS onto Lando Norris. And as it proved, it would have been a pretty great option, to be honest. In fact, it would have been even better if I put on Piastri, but who was, if I'm going to pick between Piastri and Norris pre-Qatar, I would have just gone with my gut on Norris. So yeah, another opportunity missed for the triple DRS boost, but another opportunity sort of arrives now. We go into COTA and the possibility of holding on until Brazil. The rest of my team, I held on to Sergio Perez. My goodness, do I regret that? But I'm still actually in two minds, believe it or not, despite his terrible form. I'm kind of still in two minds about it. I am currently leaning away to dropping him off, but we'll talk about more that in just a minute when I go into Qatar. But yeah, Sergio Perez in Qatar. Obviously, yet another DNF. It wasn't really his fault, to be fair, in the sprint race, but nevertheless, he DNF'd. I mean, I guess you could argue it was his fault because he put himself in a bad position because of qualifying. He put himself in that position to get into a tangle with the midfield teams, and that's exactly what happened. Got the DNF, and he recovered to some extent on the Sunday and made up some points, but overall still lost me team value and still came away with a negative 3 points, I believe. So I mean, it could have been worse because I could have had Carlos Sainz, which would have been my alternative pick, and he had the not the DNF but the DNS, obviously with his engine problem. So keep an eye on Carlos Sainz. Is he going to have some sort of new engine parts potentially in COTA? If he is, then that is potential for the 2 times DRS on him for. If I decide to go with the triple DRS and Max Verstappen, if he gets that grid penalty, it kind of makes Carlos Sainz tempting, I think. Although it also makes me wonder, will Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari actually be strong enough to make through enough positions if he does get a grid penalty? But this is pure speculation, so I've literally heard absolutely nothing about the potential for a grid penalty yet. This is just me thinking that there's a possibility and just like, please let me have a good option for the 2 times DRS. So the rest of the team did excellent. Basically, it was just all Sergio Perez just fell flat on his face. If we just ignore Sergio Perez, the rest of my team did phenomenally well. McLaren's did excellent. Verstappen did what Verstappen always does. Red Bull still pulled up some good numbers despite Perez's failure because of Max Verstappen. And then the budget king himself, Zhou Guanyu, once again delivered, and also delivered in terms of budget increase. So yeah, overall very happy with my team and moved back up into the top 1,000, which is where I'd really like to finish with 5 race weekends to go. I don't really have a target as such, but it would just be really nice to finish in the top 1,000. It's just really nice to have like a triple digit finish, or if I really smash the triple DRS boost, maybe I'll get lucky and get into the double digits, but I find that very unlikely, to be honest. It has to be like a perfect final 5 race weekends, and it's very tight at the top. One little DNF which you didn't account for, and your weekend's basically in the mud. So it's got to be a perfect finish, and obviously a lot of that is down to variance and just good or bad luck, but we can mitigate that as much as we can by deciding on who we think are the best picks, and that's what we're going to do excuse me, right now. So why don't I start off first of all by discussing when I'm going to be talking about my team selection. It's going to revolve quite heavily on the triple DRS boost, because I guess I could have a look at my team with the triple DRS boost and without it, and then there's also the option for like Limitless. Not for me, but I know there'll be lots of Limitless potential out there. So I will touch on that a little bit towards the end of the video probably, but for the time being, I'm just going to talk about my team and my thoughts, and hopefully some of that will spill over into your teams and you can get some thoughts on that. So like I said, this is my team at the moment from Qatar, and my initial thought is I could actually just leave it as it is. If Sergio Perez was performing well, this is, in my opinion, like just the best team for budget providing. If you manage to have a bit more budget, maybe you could argue maybe Alex Albon is potentially a better pick than Guan Yu Zhou, but I'm not even sure that's true. And particularly going into COTA, there's quite a few overtakes generally speaking on this track, so I think Guan Yu Zhou, the overtake master in the budget category, is just a great pick. So I think leaving the team as it is definitely a potential. The trouble is Sergio Perez. Sergio Perez has done really poorly recently. Let's have a quick flick over to the F1 Fantasy Tools website. We see Perez's recent form over here. The last 3 races, -3, -11, and -16. Bear in mind the -3 comes on a sprint weekend when you should be scoring even more points. You compare that to the likes of Verstappen, who's over there on 62 points. It's pretty embarrassing because of that DNF. So Perez, really a man off form. And in terms of actual race pace as well, he just was really, really unimpressive in Qatar. I was thinking like, oh, he's got the good potential here to make his way up. And then you saw George Russell get taken out by Hamilton on turn 1 on the first lap. And Russell was pretty much on par with where Perez were after the initial pit stops. And Russell was just blitzing past people, overtaking. The race pace was phenomenal, overtaking into that turn, I think it was turn 6, which was unofficially renamed sort of George Russell corner because he just kept doing some nice moves down there. Russell really impressed me in Qatar. And not just Russell, but the Mercedes race pace itself. And it's a shame, it's a real shame that Hamilton did actually collide with Russell, because I think it would have been really interesting to see if the Mercedes could have actually challenged the likes of Verstappen for the race win, because the Mercedes definitely look strong. The trouble is, are they going to look as strong in COTA? And that's kind of a question mark which I haven't answered yet. But yeah, apart from that, I do think, basically my point is that Perez is off form. Russell himself, I think in this category, you got Perez, you got George Russell, you got Carlos Sainz, and all of them have had a DNF within the last 3 races, or a DNS, like I say, for Carlos Sainz. Carlos Sainz is arguably kind of the man in form despite that DNS. It wasn't his fault, basically. It was a complete reliability issue before the race, which shut him out. Otherwise, I would have imagined he'd probably finish with a reasonable chunk around 20 plus points, which would have been absolutely fine, especially considering a lot of people would have been sat with Perez and been stuck on -3 there, so it would have been quite nice for Sainz owners. As it is, it wasn't to be. But I do think Sainz is very tempting. He was on pole here last year before he got punted out by George Russell. What goes around comes around, I guess. But yeah, I do think Sainz is definitely a good option going in this weekend, as you can see the recent form. If we look at actually, let's just change this quickly to just sprint races as well. It's kind of interesting. You can see that both the Mercedes guys are kind of up there. And in terms of budget, I wish I could afford Hamilton, and I could if I completely warped my team, because he's definitely a very good candidate for a potential podium this weekend, I think, because he's just got a really good track record around here in COTA. But yeah, if you look at the sprint weekend in general, you see Russell and Hamilton both doing well behind Verstappen. Piastri, who's almost certainly going to be in the team because he's so cheap for what he's providing. And then next along the line is Carlos Sainz in a respectable kind of 5th position. And if you go all the way to the bottom of the pack, who's at the bottom propping everyone up? Sergio Perez. And that's because, I guess, of these double DNFs here in Belgium and Qatar, which has really hampered his average score. Nevertheless, Perez certainly gives me some cause for concern. And do I want him in my team going into COTA? I think right now the answer is no. And I do think that there will be definitely a weekend or two where Perez finally delivers and everyone's like, yeah, he's back, he's okay, he'll be in the Red Bull for 2024, everything's fine. Particularly with Mexico right around the corner, literally the week after COTA, makes me think pulling Perez out my team right before his home race, where if he's going to do well anywhere where he generally does do well, it is Mexico, which is right after COTA. So it kind of makes me think, do I want to leave Perez in for that? But then I could also just stop him back in for Mexico and just kind of forget about him for the sprint weekend. And I think that's probably the sensible thing to do. I think there's a fine line between patience and stubbornness, and I think I'm starting to cross that line if I keep Perez in my team any longer, because he's just not delivering. So, like I've already touched on, who are the alternatives to Sergio Perez? I think for me, the obvious switches are just George Russell, Carlos Sainz in that price category. Below that, you're kind of looking at Fernando Alonso potentially. Yeah, but I kind of want to stretch the budget a bit more, and I think Russell and Carlos Sainz have just got a better podium potential, particularly as the Aston Martin's kind of fallen away a little bit. And George Russell's certainly someone that interests me. He had that. He looked impressive around Singapore. We flick it back to the last couple of races. So he looked impressive. Oh, let's get this back up. Sorry, get all the numbers back up there. So Singapore, he looked impressive. He looked like he was gonna potentially even win the race up until the last couple of laps when he just couldn't get around Lando Norris. And in the end, he ended up putting the wall and ended up coming away with a -2. But, apart from that very last lapse of concentration, he looked really impressive in Singapore. Japan, if we sort it by Japan, 14 points is not phenomenal, but it's kind of respectable. And then a nice strong 37 points in Qatar puts him in 4th place behind, the literal podium position people on the Grand Prix. So I do think Russell's definitely a good option. He's kind of in good form, and Mercedes have also got this fairly big upgrade. I say fairly big. I think it's probably going to gain them. This is, again, speculation. I don't really know. It's probably going to gain them a 10.42, I'd imagine, in terms of on a lap pace around the 1 lap. But whether that's going to spill into qualifying and race pace, or just race pace, or just quali pace, or a bit of both, I don't know. I don't know enough about what the upgrade is. I think it's some sort of floor upgrade from what I understand. Correct me if I'm wrong. But either way, regardless, there's going to be an upgrade for Mercedes. George Russell's kind of in reasonable form. He looked certainly really good around Qatar for sure. And I think he's a good substitute for Perez for me. And the trouble is, though, if I'm going to use a triple DRS, which I'd obviously put on Max Verstappen, who gets that 2 times DRS? Out of the people in this current team, I think it's quite tight between Russell and Norris, and you could even argue Piastri, although I don't know. I think Lando Norris has got quite a reasonable track record around COTA as well, so I'd kind of probably be more tempted to just go Lando Norris. He's very consistent. Maybe he's overdue a DNF. I don't know. Russell's had his fair share of DNFs this season, so maybe he's kind of paid his dues in terms of DNF, but at the same time, maybe that's also a bit of a warning that he is susceptible to a DNF. So do I really want to put 2 times DRS boost on someone that's susceptible to a DNF? Not particularly. So maybe I lean towards Lando Norris again, but again, I don't think McLaren are going to necessarily be as strong in COTA as they were in Qatar, which makes me think I wish I'd put the double DRS boost on Lando Norris, because I was much more sure about it, and it would have been a good result, but it wasn't because I didn't use it. Oh my goodness, I need to slow down talking. Right, basically the bottom line is, this weekend for the triple DRS boost is obviously Max Verstappen. The big trouble is, who do we put the double DRS boost on? For me, that's what's making me lean towards, again, the ultimate game of patience, and that is waiting until Brazil in a couple of weeks' time. Although it does scare me a little bit of the weather, the windy, kind of fairly dangerous track in terms of collision potential. But also, with engines starting to tire out towards the end of the season, and sprint race, maybe teams will view the sprint race as an opportunity to take a grid penalty and be able to gain it back, depending on whether the grid penalty comes into play, whether it's a sprint or the Grand Prix. I have a feeling it might be saved for the Grand Prix in terms of penalties for engine penalties. I'm not entirely sure, but if someone knows the answer to that exactly, then it'd be great to know. But either way, I do think that there's potential, particularly like Lando Norris, Max Verstappen. We could see some grid penalties coming in if they need a new engine before the end of the season as they tire out. At the same time, also, if they don't take a grid penalty and they're using these ancient engines that have been around for half a dozen races or more, there's a potential for the engine to conk out around Brazil. So hold on to the triple DRS and on the hope and a prayer of an engine penalty. It doesn't come and you end up just getting a DNF and you get the 2 times, or heaven forbid, the triple DNF on Max Verstappen, then your season's just absolutely in the mud. If I triple DRS boost Verstappen and he finally gets a DNF, then season is absolutely mudded and I'll be nowhere near the top 1,000. So the temptation to just use it this weekend in COTA is certainly right there. The trouble is, as I've already stated, who do we put in for the double DRS boost? So the alternatives would be Carlos Sainz, who's also the man on form. In fact, he is definitely the man on form. Even if you take out what happened in Qatar with his DNS, if you look at the last sort of 4 or 5 races, you ignore that -14. He's scored 18, which is kind of fine, and then 45, 38, 31. That's definitely like the in-form man. He's not quite, but almost on par for Verstappen. Not quite. There's a bit of a stretch to say he's on par, but he's there or thereabouts in terms of second place driver in terms of form. And like I said, he got pole here last season. We don't really see what he could have done because he got punted out and got too much damage from George Russell in turn 1. So it'll be interesting to see what he can do this time round. And I think it's very tight it's just very tight in general between him, Carlos Sainz, George Russell and Perez, although Perez is kind of a bit more down than the likes of Russell and Sainz for me at the moment. So yeah, I think in terms of team selection, if I wanted to kind of play it safe, regardless if I'm going to use a triple DRS boost or not, I think I'm leaning towards either this build, keeping that core of the triple McLaren, who I anticipate to do well, even if they're not going to be as spectacular as Qatar. It's a really hard track to read. I'll be honest, it's a really hard track to read because there's a wide variety of corners. There's high speed, there's low speed, there's long straights. You've got the Maggot and Beckett's bit. God, that's a bit of a tongue twister. In Sector 1, which should probably favour the McLarens. And then you've got the two long straight start-finish line and kind of the back straight, which probably favour more like the Ferraris. Have got quite good straight line speed compared to McLaren. And then you've got kind of the slower stuff for the Mercedes will probably come into their own as well. So it's really hard to say, this constructor or this constructor is going to do really well. It's kind of a little bit of a mix, and it's who's going to get the edge. I feel like it's going to be close, which makes me think using the triple DRS boost is maybe not optimal, but I can't just wait forever. I keep finding this is the problem. I keep finding small little reasons to hold off, and before I know it, I'm going to run out of time. So yeah, I do think I need to really make a decision on this. It's stressing me out. It's literally stressed me out all season. I wish I'd just used it back in Austria and I could forget about the whole thing. It's the only chip I got left. But anyway, that's kind of where I'm at. The alternative, I will say, is I have considered, although I'm not heavily considering it anymore, although it's still on my radar, is to bring in Lewis Hamilton because of how strong he is around this track. I think 5-time previous winner here. So if we brought in Lewis Hamilton, the only way I can get it realistically is dropping the Red Bull constructor, which I don't really want to do because although Perez keeps messing up, the strength of Verstappen just means that the Red Bull constructor is just generally the best, if not second best kind of constructor in general. Whereas if Perez does finally have a decent weekend and I don't have Red Bull on my team, then I'm going to be again kind of mudded because the Red Bull constructor is pretty heavily owned at 54%. I thought it'd be more higher than that, to be honest, but 54% nevertheless. So the way I can kind of get around it, if I think the Mercedes are going to be good, I could even just kind of go in with the Ferraris and just go with a team like this. This is another option. Again, a lot kind of weighs on that FP1. Not a lot of time to give us data, not a lot of information provided given the sprint weekend, but this is definitely something I would also consider and go in triple DRS boost on Max Verstappen and the double DRS boost on Lewis Hamilton. I would feel quite confident with the double DRS boost on Lewis Hamilton. He's done well at sprints so far this year. He's phenomenal around this track. Mercedes got an upgrade. I'm definitely tempted by dropping Red Bull, but it does scare me because if Perez finally comes out of that slump and gets a good weekend together, then it's very likely that Red Bull are going to be the strongest constructor. It's just how much do I want to outweigh Red Bull being a strong constructor versus Lewis Hamilton being a strong double DRS booster. So I'd only go with this team if I'm going with the triple DRS boost and I want someone that I'm really, really confident at the double DRS boost. And I think Lewis Hamilton kind of fits that bill, despite his mistake last weekend out in Qatar. Because I think in general, Lewis Hamilton, when it comes to DNF, kind of avoids them in general. He's pretty good in terms of reliability and getting to the finish line. So that's kind of what you want to see. So I can afford this team and I am tempted by it. It looks pretty nice, to be honest. It means I can still get the super budget man, Guan Yu Zhou. It means I get the triple on the McLaren boys. It means I still hold on to the best driver, the man at the moment. And then Ferrari are kind of a bit more of a... I kind of like, hopefully they do. Hopefully they can sort of match Red Bull more or less, and then kind of hope that the triple and the double on Lewis and Max pay off. And one other alternative, slight edge to this, although I probably don't want it so much, it means I have to drop Guan Yu Zhou, which I don't really want to do, is just to bring in the Mercedes constructor in general and bring in the drive. Oh my goodness, I'm scrolling all over the place. I don't like this. And then bring in like Yuki Tsunoda and go over a team like this I can just about afford. Maybe the Mercedes look particularly strong. Maybe I just want to forget about Ferrari and just go in and this. Again, this is a build which I probably only really consider for the triple DRS boost usage to get Lewis Hamilton in there. Because again, I'm very reluctant to move away from Red Bull. The only time all season long I've moved away from Red Bull is in Singapore, and it proved to be correct, even though it didn't prove to be correct by a wide margin. It was still the right decision, whereas I don't see it necessarily happening anymore for pretty much the rest of the season. So this is definitely an option for me, given my budget is enough for me to afford. And Lewis Hamilton, like I say, I'm very tempted by one of these Lewis builds because of the use of the triple DRS boost. But again, this is kind of a leftover effect of me not using it sooner. Now I'm kind of having to warp my team slightly to try and get in a comfortable kind of 2 times DRS boost. I could just play it safe, like I say, just forget about the whole Lewis Hamilton build. Keep Red Bull racing in there. Hope Perez kind of does reasonably well, and just go with like Sainz or Russell, team like this. And oh wait, we got to bring back the Budget King. Sorry, Guan Yu's in there. And go with a team like this and just kind of be happy about it. Just kind of slow and steady. Don't do anything too dramatic, but we'll see. If the Mercedes light up FP1 and Lewis and George are like raving about the W14 all over again, then W14, W15, yeah, W14. I'm completely losing track of everything at the moment. I've been talking too much, but we're going to continue on. We need to plow on because we're going to discuss Limitless in a second as well. So that's kind of my thoughts for my team personally, as I've only got the triple DRS boost left. Basically, my decisions come down to, do I want to use the triple DRS boost? If I do, who gets a double? Do I bring in Lewis Hamilton and change the team around a little bit in terms of the constructor? Or do I just kind of play it safe and steady, bring in either Carlos Sainz or George Russell, or dare I say it, keep Sergio Perez? Although, like I've already said, kind of hold my hands up and saying I don't really want to stick with Perez at the moment. He is not impressed, particularly around Qatar. Track limits being an issue, general race pace just nowhere near what it should be. It's just, yeah, that Qatar weekend has really put me off Sergio Perez, I'm not going to lie. Has it put me off enough to get rid of the Red Bull constructor? Probably not quite, but it's something I am considering. Again, mainly because of the triple DRS boost option. However, anyway, there's lots of people out there as well that will have Limitless. And Limitless this weekend is a bit of a tough one. If I had the Limitless chip left, I would definitely be considering it this weekend. I've said before, I tweeted out a week or so ago about this, and I said that there's no set recipe for success with the Limitless chip. You have to play it by ear. You have to pay close attention to who looks good, and basically you want to use it when the McLarens don't look like the second best team. If the Mercedes or the Ferraris look like they're going to be on top, then that would be a good time to use it. And I think personally the Mercedes are going to be strongest around Mexico and Brazil. So if I had the Limitless chip left, I would be slightly leaning away from COTA personally, and I would be looking slightly more towards Brazil, I would say. But with the flexibility of being open to putting it on in Mexico as well, you know, it worked out for Limitless chip users back in Monza, which wasn't a sprint weekend. It really worked out nicely. I think I gained about 70 or 80 points on the template, so it doesn't have to be used on a sprint weekend. It's just probably more ideal if you can use it. So if I had the Limitless chip left, I would be looking at Brazil, because I think Mercedes is going to be strong around there, and then you could go on like a triple up on Mercedes, put in Verstappen and Red Bull's constructor. I mean, I can't build the team on here because I don't have the budget. It won't let me do it because the stupid template of the website. But I would go like triple Mercedes. Probably still ignore Sergio Perez, but let's go Verstappen, Red Bull, and then one maybe like the Clerk or Sainz, or maybe both of them. In fact, yeah. So that's kind of what I'd be thinking if I was using Limitless. I think it's unclear. This is the whole reason why I'm still a bit unclear about using the triple DRS boost, because I don't know who the best double DRS boost is, because it's not entirely clear who is going to be strongest around this track in America. Whereas in Interlagos, I just have a hunch that the Mercedes is going to be strong there again. So I'd be kind of maybe leaning in that direction to using it in Interlagos in Brazil. But I would definitely be open if FP1, you know, this Friday comes along and the Ferraris are absolutely tearing it up. They look like the second best team to Red Bull, or even like competing for Max Verstappen to beat Max Verstappen potentially, even though I think that's unlikely. And similarly, Mercedes, if they also look really strong there with their new fancy upgrade, then I'd be definitely tempted to use it this weekend as well. I'd definitely be open to using it, but if I had it right now, which I don't have, but if I did, I would still be looking at Brazil personally. So that was probably quite a long team selection video, probably one of the longest ones I've done all season, because I've just talked about my team and triple DRS boost basically. I hope I haven't bored the socks off you too much. That's kind of my thoughts and feelings for this weekend going into COTA. It's a tough one to call, not going to lie, but I think sticking with that core kind of Verstappen and McLaren build is probably sensible, depending on budget, of course. Yeah, I think that's kind of where I'm at the moment. I'm just kind of torn between using the triple DRS boost or not. And if, you know, who that comes in at that number 2 driver in terms of Sainz, Russell, Perez, or whatever, or do I go with the Lewis Hamilton build? There's lots and lots of opportunity this weekend, lots of possibilities to choose from this weekend. This is what we like about F1 Fantasy, so thank God for that. And I'll be looking closely at new news from F1 and driver interviews, and of course FP1 on Friday will be very important to pay attention to see who's looking good. At least on the positive side, if I'm going to use a triple DRS boost, the weather looks nice, so it looks nice and sunny, so hopefully it won't be any rain affected if I do go for it. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at the moment. And yeah, please go ahead and comment if you've got any comments, because I'll be interested to know what your opinion is on the likes of the chip usage this weekend, if you've got any left, or even if you don't have any left and just kind of want to put your bit in there, then I'll be happy to read your comment and reply to it. So yeah, thanks very much for listening, and I'll catch you again soon. We're nearly there at the end of the season. 4 more race weekends after this, so coming thick and fast. Let's hope for the best. Good luck this weekend, and fingers crossed if you use a chip. Fingers crossed if you don't too. Thanks for listening to me. Catch you later.